From Kingston, Jamaica, good morning. Welcome to Artificial Intelligence in the Caribbean Context. What are we talking about? A forum organized within the framework of the Caribbean Artificial Intelligence Initiative. My name is Cordell Green, Executive Director of the Broadcasting Commission of Jamaica and the Vice Chairman of UNESCO's Information for All program, IFAP. It is my privilege to moderate this session. The Caribbean AI initiative is being undertaken by the UNESCO Cluster Office for the Caribbean and the Broadcasting Commission of Jamaica with support from UNESCO's Information for All program, IFAP. The overall purpose of the initiative is to raise awareness about the opportunities and the challenges of artificial intelligence and to encourage Caribbean small island developing states to work together on AI issues. The presentations this morning and our discussion from this and future fora will inform the preparation of an AI policy brief for the Caribbean. It is particularly noteworthy that today's discussion takes place on International Human Rights Day, a timely reminder that we should prioritize a human-centric approach to AI development and use. Before we get into the program, a few housekeeping matters. As you would see, we have an interpreter, so we are sharing. We'll split the screen at some point. If you need to adjust the size of the video feed, we have some instructions in the chat. We will have time for some questions from the audience. We ask you to post your questions using the Q&A function and not the chat. And if you're posting on social media, we ask you to use the hashtags AI for the number 4, AI for Caribbean, and human AI. And we have posted those hashtags in the chat as well. Without further ado, I am pleased to introduce the Director of the UNESCO Cluster Office for the Caribbean to make her welcoming remarks. Director Sadia Sanchez-Vegas, the floor is yours.
Many thanks for that introduction. And thank you for mentioning that today is the Human Rights Day. Mr. Cordell Green, Executive Director, Broadcasting Commission Jamaica, Secretary General of the various UNESCO national commissions in the English and Dutch-speaking Caribbean countries and territory, UNESCO partners and colleagues, dear participants. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Caribbean Forum, Artificial Intelligence in the Caribbean Context. What are we talking about? To organize this forum, UNESCO partnered with the Broadcasting Commission in Jamaica. So I would like to thank them for their cooperation. The forum is one of the various actions inscribed in the Caribbean Artificial Intelligence Initiative, developed by our Kingston Cluster Office for the Caribbean since 2019. These actions will allow us to talk concretely on how can AI, artificial intelligence, my apologies for that, artificial intelligence be harnessed to contribute to the sustainable development of the Caribbean seas. The overall purpose of this initiative is to raise awareness and promote reflection on the opportunities and challenges that artificial intelligence poses for the Caribbean seed societies, governments, private sector, non-profit organizations, and citizens. The relation between artificial intelligence and the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, promote the use of artificial intelligence as a lever for development and to promote national and regional STI and AI strategies. As you mentioned, today is the Human Rights Day. This day, December 10th, the UN General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This was in 1948. In this context, permit me to reflect on this matter. Artificial intelligence systems and applications are developing at tremendous speed. We all know that, raising several ethical, legal, and humanistic concerns. These concerns include how far can machines or the machines' autonomy and their decision-making power be allowed? If an error, an accident occurs, who is responsible? How can we assure that artificial intelligence does not exacerbate existing bias and discrimination or create new ways of it? And we are speaking about women, minority groups, indigenous people, persons with disability. These are all matters that must be grounded on human rights. To address these questions and concerns, strategies and STI policies should be developed at the national and regional level, and certain specific matters related to the focus of these strategies will have to be addressed. What will be the focus of an artificial intelligence strategy at a national level, at a regional level? Scientific research, talent development, skills and education, public and private sector adoption, ethics and inclusion? That most definitely, I will repeat it, ethics and inclusion, standards and regulations. My apologies. Standards and regulations. These are all matters that definitely need to be addressed. Data and digital infrastructure, for example. As UNESCO has expressed, SIDS and developing countries in general cannot and should not be just clients or providers and users of data. Decision must be made on these most relevant matters to realistically pursue a sustainable future for our countries. UNESCO is acting in this area and has actively engaged in the elaboration and establishment of such mechanisms and tools. We do have tools available to address these matters. This is one of our areas of actions in the framework of the artificial intelligence strategy, which the Cluster Office for the Caribbean. I have to apologize for that. Which the Cluster Office for the Caribbean is designing and putting in place. UNESCO is leading the ethics of artificial intelligence at the global level through the elaboration of the recommendation on the ethics of artificial intelligence, an international standard-setting instrument that will advise governments and countries on policies and practices related to the ethics of artificial intelligence. As part of the United Nations family, UNESCO's mandate calls for human rights based on human-centered approach to artificial intelligence that do not deepen divide between people, regions, and countries. We believe that UNESCO has a unique role to play also in examining the ethical implications for peace and sustainable development at the national, regional, and global levels, as well as for our global priorities of gender and Africa and our priority groups as youth and small island developing states. Our forum today is part of a series of activities carried on by UNESCO on artificial intelligence. UNESCO's work in this area reflects growing awareness on that artificial intelligence can help address many humanity challenges, including those related to gender equalities, education, sciences, culture, media, freedom of expression, and access to information, and addressing disinformation and harmful content challenges. This could be an excellent tool in the midst of a global pandemic such as the COVID-19. The UNESCO Cluster Office for the Caribbean is committed to continue to engage our stakeholders in the Caribbean sub-region in the development of strategies, plans, and policies that ensure that the development and deployment of artificial intelligence is harnessed for social good. We are confident that the dialogue and conversations that are to be taking place this morning are not only a step forward, but also will ensure that our aspirations of an inclusive, diverse, ethical, and human rights-based artificial intelligence becomes a reality. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Director Sanchez Vegas. And may I say again, a very warm welcome to the Caribbean. You were recently appointed. It's as if you've been here for a very long time. You're already very much immersed. We hear your telephone ringing. We know you're in demand all over the world. So thank you for taking the time out this morning.
On the contrary.
Stay with us for as long as you can, please.
I will. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Thank you for your very warm welcoming remarks. Thank you.
So we hop over now to Ghana, where we join the illustrious chair of the Information for All program, IFAP, and an honorary Caribbean woman, Dorothy Gordon.
Thank you very much, Cordell, my dear friend, and also Vice Chair of the Working Group on Information Access within IFAP. Distinguished members of, I don't know, what should I say? Should I say distinguished speakers, as well as dear friends and relatives, because as you know, and as we believe in Ghana, everyone in Jamaica should be back home here. It really gives me a great pleasure. I'm frankly delighted to join you today for this important exchange of ideas. And what a great title, Artificial Intelligence in the Caribbean. What are we talking about? I am pleased to join you not only in my capacity as the IFAP chair, but also as a member of the group of experts supporting the Global Partnership for Artificial Intelligence. IFAP, as I'm sure many of you already know, is dedicated to working with member states to build a more sustainable, inclusive, and equitable knowledge society. Unfortunately, our experience this year with the pandemic has shown us that our mandate is even more important today than ever before. When many of you may not know that IFAP is going to be 20 years old next year, and it's unfortunate that we see that the divides that we hope to address have actually deepened over the past few months. And we have even more new challenges that we need to address. The Global Partnership for Artificial Intelligence has as its mission to support the development and use of AI based on human rights, inclusion, diversity, innovation, and economic growth, while seeking to address the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. It was launched in June 2020 as a voluntary multi-stakeholder initiative with a permanent focus on AI and with a founding membership that covers 2.5 billion of the world's population. And I mention this because there are many resources available on their website for all of those who are interested in probing in depth in areas around this topic. But this is just one of many international bodies that are trying to ensure that we steer AI towards supporting a better future for humanity. And UNESCO is actively engaged in a number of these initiatives, including developing the global standard setting instrument on ethics of artificial intelligence. And what does all of this mean for us in the global South? I would like us to look at this in a very pragmatic way. And we can look at it and imagine, what do we need to do now? And then we can imagine, where would we like to be 5 years from now? We have, first of all, for many countries, it's very clear that we need to actually map our competencies in artificial intelligence. And it's interesting to note that the Europeans are busy trying to figure out how they can work more effectively together, because they've recognized that in any single country, they don't actually have enough of the competencies to be competitive. And there we are talking about the competencies that are needed to develop AI. And we have many different types of AI, but I will talk in very general terms in this particular speech. One of the things that they are also worried about is the quality of the infrastructure that has to support AI. And here again, I'm talking about the development of AI. And that is not only in terms of the kind of bandwidth that we're talking about, but it is also in terms of the data infrastructures, let me put it this way. And I'm not going to talk too much about infrastructure today. I really want us to focus much more on competencies. And the first thing I would love to say, and I think all of us recognize it, that first of all, we are constantly using artificial intelligence. I'm sure that half of you who are listening to this, and I'm very pleased to see there are more than 100 of you just on the Zoom link. You may be looking at your phones, checking something, using your geolocation app or using a language app. We are using artificial intelligence all the time. But in the countries of the South, very often, we are using it as consumers and not producers. So I would like us to mark that down and say, okay, what is it going to take for us to become producers of technology? And I'll get into this a little bit later, because it's very clear that we need to do so for so many reasons. But let me just remind us that if we have what seems to be a COVID vaccine or a set of COVID vaccines today, it would not have been possible without the mapping of the genome that artificial intelligence allowed us to do, and the simulations that allowed us to test the effects of that vaccine. I love agriculture, so I always mention agriculture, business, finance. There's so much that AI is doing on the positive level. And as I said, there's so many meetings to discuss it. But we can't, today, we cannot say whether I am speaking for the Caribbean or I'm speaking for Africa. We cannot say that currently we are competitive when it comes to producing AI solutions. We see that there are two poles globally, one in the US and the other in China. And when it comes to robotics, Japan is a very significant player. So we will have to think about how we are going to consume artificial intelligence, because right now we are not producing it to any significant degree. That is not to say there are no companies at all. There are some companies, very interesting things to see on the SourceForge or the GitHub, but we are not global competitors yet. So that means we are going to be buying technology. And this is particularly interesting for me because in the context of IFAP, we work principally with governments. And we know that there are many government to citizen and government to government solutions that are going to be dependent on AI. And what does that mean? In the various fora that I've been participating in, one of the things they're discussing is to actually produce in-depth guidelines, a framework for the development of artificial intelligence that will guarantee a certain level of transparency, a certain level of trust, and a greater certitude that it will be working for a better future. I want to propose that in addition to those guidelines, we actually produce procurement guidelines, because what we've observed is that in many governments around the world, public officials do not have the competencies at present to be able to assess what the implications of a particular AI solution could be. And I found very interesting, I think it's about 10 days ago that they made the announcement that New York State is now going to be asking companies that it buys solutions from, AI solutions from, to actually reveal their algorithm to New York State so that they can audit that algorithm for its impacts. I want to remind us that these are very important issues for people of color, because we have seen from software that's been deployed elsewhere that just being a person of color could brand you as somebody who's more likely to commit a crime. It could make you invisible in terms of a camera that could guarantee where you are. There's so much evidence of algorithmic bias, not only against people of color, but particularly women. And being a woman and a woman of color, I feel it. So we should be looking at the work of people like Safaya Noble. And then, of course, we have the guru Shoshana Zuboff, who has written so extensively on surveillance capitalism. But when we are procuring these AI solutions right now, how are we going to determine if there could be algorithmic bias? What is it in our procurement guidelines that we could write in that could help us to overcome those potential kind of loopholes or traps? And I see that developing very clear guidelines to help us with the procurement of AI can also act as a capacity building measure so that more of our public officials become aware of what to look out for, and to eventually get us to a state where we would be auditing AI solutions for their appropriateness. And let me just mention now quickly, because I see that I'm taking quite a bit of time. Let me mention quickly that many countries rush to buy education solutions in order to provide remote learning during the time of the pandemic. Not so many countries were able to look at the implications for data and how the data of their children and the overall data management system for schools and higher education would be managed. And this data literacy, as it were, is another very important area of AI competency. if we are going to move forward. So many people, when they talk about artificial intelligence, they imagine this doomsday kind of scenario where we are controlled by autonomous machines that are taking decisions independent of human beings. Frankly, the technology is not there yet, but we really do have to work on the legal framework and the regulations that will ensure that whatever happens in future, that we would be able to deal with this. So looking at today, there are practical things that we can do to help us to manage the technology that we'll be procuring better. But as we move forward, all those issues to do with rights, all those issues to do with our context, all those issues that are to do with collaboration are going to come to the fore. And I believe that we truly need to work on building our innovation ecosystems in such a way that we will be able to provide the solutions that are appropriate for our needs. And the cooperation does not only have to be within the Caribbean. I was interested to see one small country, two small countries actually across the world collaborating together to come out with solutions. So you will have to figure what are your real needs in terms of the development challenges of the Caribbean? Where can AI support these? And what kind of AI companies you're going to encourage to establish themselves within the Caribbean and hopefully be providing jobs for people within the Caribbean. I believe that artificial intelligence offers us great opportunities for building our capabilities up in such a way that we do create jobs. And that means we have to get into the school system immediately. And while we need to revamp our whole curriculum, including in subject areas within higher education, because so many of them, when they leave school, they will be using these solutions in their work. I think that there are great resources out there, and I'll point to the excellent resources that UNESCO has put up for K-12 on artificial intelligence. There's so much that needs to be done. At the level of IFAP, we are going to continue engaging with our members all around the world, distilling the knowledge that comes out of that engagement. We are not necessarily looking at best practice alone. We will be looking at what I would say are best principles. What are the principles that should be guiding us as we move forward? And it's very clear that the UN, UNESCO, and IFAP have a huge role to play in this, because in order for us to come out with the overall framework, international cooperation and multi-stakeholder dialogue of the kind that the UN is so good at organizing are essential. And we need to look at the future in terms of the agreements that we have already signed and signed our countries up to, including all of those on human rights, including those on the Rome Principles, rights, open, access, and multi-stakeholder, and also come to some agreement in terms of which common values we are going to reflect in the artificial intelligence that we hope to look to in the future. So in conclusion, let me just summarize and say we may not be where we want to be today, but we do have a lot of opportunities for actually making things better right now as well as building for a better future. So with those few remarks, I would say thank you very much. And I'm really looking forward to learning a lot more about the Caribbean over the next few days, hours. I don't know how to describe it. And just mention as I leave you how much I enjoyed being in Jamaica, because as soon as I got off the plane, I felt at home. And I know that if any of you come to Ghana, you will feel the same way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dorothy Gordon, Chair for UNESCO's Information for All program. Quite a bit you've given us there to unpack, and we won't be able to cover a lot of it in this forum, but certainly when we follow up in February with the second forum and the third in March, we'll be able to touch on some of these, including the very important point you made about surveillance capitalism and the importance of procurement. I'd also like to tell you, Madam Chair and Madam Director Sanchez Vegas, that the AI for IA conference, which was held on September 28th, the report has been completed, and we're going to post a link to that report in the chat. If it is not already there, it's going to be done shortly. Please download it, have a look at that report. Yes, I just saw it being posted. Very important questions raised there. Before we get to our first distinguished presenter, we just want to get an idea of who are the people on this call. So let's just do a very quick poll here, just to see the mix. How familiar are you with artificial intelligence? Your options are, you know nothing at all, you know, you can have a conversation, or you are very knowledgeable. So let's see. It's a fairly good mix of persons. Most individuals able to hold a conversation, and then we have a significant number not knowing a lot about AI. And that's not a problem. Those who know nothing or very little or just enough to have a conversation, that's what's going on in most places in the world, including the developed countries. So we are not behind, and we have a great opportunity to leapfrog by coming up to speed very quickly, which is what we hope our next presenter will help us to begin to do. She's Erica Simmons, the Executive Director of the Center for Digital Innovation at the Caribbean Maritime University, and she will be talking about artificial intelligence, a Caribbean approach.
Greetings to all of you on the Caribbean AI Initiative's online discussion of artificial intelligence in the Caribbean context. What are we talking about? I'm Erica Simmons, and I will be taking you through a small discussion today. I'll share my screen. We can get into it. So, artificial intelligence in the Caribbean context. Again, I'm Erica Simmons. I'm the Executive Director for the Center for Digital Innovation at the Caribbean Maritime University here in Kingston, Jamaica. As an inventor of algorithmic products, a political and social scientist, a global technology practitioner, it's amazing to see that we have reached the time where we're talking about artificial intelligence at a regional level for small island developing states and in the Caribbean context. It's really a joy to learn about the future, and one where we can ensure that we create an environment where it is inclusive for everyone. And it was the late professor, statistician, engineer, lecturer, consultant, William Deming, who believed in a world where there is joy in learning and joy in work, and where everyone will win. He's perhaps best known and is for the Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle, named after him, and also credited with this quote, "In God we trust, in all others bring data." Now, most would agree that a data-driven future is far superior than where we are right now. And however, a key to this data-driven decision-making future is to use data to inform decisions and know that the answers are not just in the data. The data part of the equation is not in isolation. Today, our seminar will take a deeper understanding of artificial intelligence, and we're going to go inside AI to see where the opportunities and the risk lie for us as small island developing states, and to look a little bit at the context of what AI means for the Caribbean. No discussion for me would be complete without talking about our history of industrial development and the fact that the artificial intelligence is a part and is driving the way in the fourth industrial revolution. Artificial intelligence is going to be a transformative technology just like electricity was. And now we're in the age of joining computers with physical systems. We're in the age of cyber physical systems. And I can give you just a very simplistic example of a cyber physical system. I just got a smart meter at my home now, and I can look at my consumption patterns for electricity. I can be a more informed consumer. I can decide whether or not I want to monitor my behavior and adjust my behavior, because now I have more data. I can look at my data and my consumption patterns on an application. And so you could see that everyday standard products that had no intelligence before will be getting this integration of artificial intelligence. Now, let's look at what was happening in the industry before we got to this artificial intelligence space where we are now. And we have been actually for the last 10 years in a period of globalization and digital transformation. That has been happening now. And in 2020, we have this global pandemic that has fallen down on us now. There's been news that the global pandemic, COVID-19, has accelerated digital transformation, with AI playing the lead role in this acceleration. I have read recently that the acceleration from McKinsey, the transformation has been accelerated by up to 7 years. So what it would have taken 7 years for a company to do in terms of digital implementation of digital products to enable digital transformation, the pandemic has done in a year. Now, let's look at what artificial intelligence is, because they said that that was the technology driving everything. And the Harvard Business Review has defined our artificial intelligence as the most important general purpose technology of our era, especially machine learning. And they've said that AI is poised to transform every industry, just as electricity did a century ago. But really, what we're fighting for now is really the heart and the head of artificial intelligence. It's our global values as a human society. And it's not just about engineering anymore now. It's really about our shared vision for what the future will be under artificial intelligence. And there's a lot of opportunity there, but we also have to take a look at the risk. But in terms of opportunity, it's looking great, actually. There's a $15.7 trillion market opportunity for the world in artificial intelligence in just the next 10 years, right? So from 2020 to 2030, there's $15.7 trillion just in artificial intelligence, in implementing those products and using them as an efficiency lever for governments and businesses. And it's actually the largest commercial business opportunity on the market today. So we have to look at how we can capitalize on using artificial intelligence, because here it's going to pervade every industry sector. It's going to be a part of every industry sector. I just told you about the utilities example a minute ago. So we got to understand AI then, since it's going to be something that is going to be like really challenging us, and we definitely have to understand where we're going with AI and understand that. And I love to look at these pictures. So these three circles of AI, machine learning, and deep learning is actually well known. And really, when we're talking about artificial intelligence today, we're talking about the machine learning layer and algorithms with the ability to learn, right, without being programmed. And we're getting to that point where the machines are going to become, more adept at making those decisions without being explicitly programmed. But for the moment, we're not at that space. Let's go look a little bit deeper into machine learning to see what that is, so we can see where the risk and where the opportunities are. So breaking down AI a little bit, I want you to look at this picture and I want you to think about machine learning components that's having three parts: a data set, a feature, and an algorithm. All right, so let's go and look at what a data set is and look at what the Caribbean opportunity is for data and information. So one thing I can tell you is data everywhere. Data is the oil and gas of machine learning and artificial intelligence. If we don't have data in a certain way, we can't really take care of the opportunity. And we're creating data as we're speaking and getting up and checking our cell phone. We're consuming data and we're giving data out. So one of the things that is interesting about this model is the amount of unstructured data that we have now. And this unstructured data is data with no data model, no structure to it. And actually the AI systems and machine learning systems have to deal with structured, well-defined, and easily organized database information. So there's possibly a huge opportunity in looking at unstructured data there. But really for the Caribbean, what we need to take into consideration is that data has value, and it's a collection of things: numbers, facts, words, measurements, pictures, descriptions of things. And it's in this unprocessed format. We got exabytes of data that are unstructured, but it's really the structured data that's what's needed for these machine learning components to work. Now, when we look at data, let's look at some of the opportunities. How about data creation for Caribbean people? We have some unique cultural data sets that we could probably create here in Jamaica and also in the region. So we want to look at how we create data. The key to the sauce there is in the format that we're creating data and that we're creating structured information for these AI systems. Then all of that unstructured data needs cleaning. Someone's got to clean it up and get it into the format. There's huge opportunity for cleansing and visualization of data here in the Caribbean. It could be something that we could develop as an industry, a service sector. And then there is the ability now to take data sets and join them with cyber physical systems. So there's huge opportunities here for us to get into the game and be a part of creating digital content and data. Okay, let's keep going. Now let's look at the features. So features are things in our machine learning application that tell the algorithm how to interpret the data. And what I've done is I've just changed out the description. This is our criminal justice app now. And you can see our criminal justice app has three portions to it. And the features, how am I going to interpret my data, is a very, very important part of this. This is where we are seeing now that we have ethical downfalls and we have considerations. This is where the biases can come in, because we have to hard code in what features, we have to hard code in how we want the data to be interpreted by the algorithm. And of course, that's where we can, fall down. That's where we need to look more at the ethics of artificial intelligence. And that's where we have this quote from German sociologist Ulrich Beck. He says that ethics plays the role of the bicycle brake in an intercontinental airplane. And in the context of AI, where we're spending huge sums of money that we're investing in the development and the commercial utilization and deployment of these systems based on machine learning, we need to make sure that ethical considerations are built in and not something that is used as a PR stunt. So let's look at the part that we can contribute here in the Caribbean as well. These applications need a heart and a head, if you would. We need the humanistic, the ethical, the do no harm side of the equation in here because it has to be balanced against the commercial opportunity. As a developer of these products at a commercial level, I understand the pressure that people have to create these products. And we really need to balance that against whether or not, you know, it's good to be able to put a certain definition into a feature. We have to bring the heart and head into these applications now. I want to tell you about this story called Coded Bias, about this researcher, Joy Boulami in MIT, and what happened to her when she opened up the black box and started to look inside and see what was in those, what were the features. And she found that the systems that she was using for facial recognition could not recognize her face because of her skin tone. And that's when she began to do the research and found out that these machine learning algorithms now, ubiquitous in systems already, like in advertising systems, hiring, financial services, and policing and many other fields, can be hard-coded to perpetuate society's existing race, class, and gender-based inequalities. It's very, very important now that we begin to pay attention to what's happening ethically. And I want to draw your attention to some really good policy guidelines here. One is from the Institute of Electronics and Electrical Engineers, the IEEE. They have their ethically aligned design policy paper. It's out in its second version. It's open for public discussion. What's interesting about this is the IEEE is a large standards body. So when we're creating technologies that meet global standards, we'll have to meet whatever the requirements are in the IEEE policies for design. So it's important that we keep close to this technical community to see what types of things they're integrating it in. I'd like to also call attention to UNESCO and the fabulous work that has been done on the first draft of the recommendation on ethics of artificial intelligence. And these works contain everything that we should be looking out for in the ethical and humanistic design of these systems. And you can see here in the announcement that we have made tremendous progress as UNESCO in the development of a global normative instrument on the ethics of artificial intelligence. I encourage us in small island developing states to take a look at that. There are also a couple other policy documents that I want you to look at as well, and we should be considering here in the Caribbean, and that's everything that UNESCO has talked about artificial intelligence and children. We should do everything that we can to protect our children from these systems and to protect their data from these systems. So there's great policy guidance from UNICEF, who just published a couple months ago, that has guidance on using AI for children. And then also, we've been doing some other work in terms of UNESCO's work in AI in education, and we have another policy brief out now that's really talking about integration of AI systems and how we use it to support our education sector. So, with that, I want to say that we have the most amazing opportunity ahead of us. The most important general purpose technology of our era is here. Over the next 10 years, a $15.7 trillion commercial opportunity. We have to pay attention to that as small island developing states. We also need to understand what data is and how to create it, how it should be structured for consumption. I showed you inside the box. We have to become smarter about what data is and making sure that we understand the value in data. And then as small island developing states, the Caribbean region, we have a body of ethical work that we should be leveraging. There are low-hanging fruit areas of ethics which have already been identified in the UNESCO report, in the IEEE report, the UNICEF report, that we can take and we can immediately begin to form our policy guidance. Of course, we'll have some, there will be some Caribbean-specific policy guidance that we will need to look at and make sure that's integrated. But we have a wonderful opportunity to move forward in this age of artificial intelligence. And with that, I will stop my presentation now and hope that you have a ton of questions for me.
Thank you very much, Erica Simmons. A really comprehensive presentation there and a lot of food for thought. I see questions already being posted in the chat, and we will start to answer some of those and not necessarily wait until the end. Remember, folks, if you have questions for the panelists, please post them in the Q&A. And I see a lively conversation taking place as well in the chat, which is great. Our next speaker needs no introduction. His reputation precedes him. I would only say he was a lead consultant to CARICOM in developing its ICT policy, Professor Paul Goulding.
Good morning and welcome to the Caribbean Artificial Intelligence Initiative Forum 1. I'm Paul Goulding from the College of Business and Management at the University of Technology, Jamaica. I'll be looking at AI for Caribbean transformation. And my presentation will look first at AI in context, then we'll look at the Caribbean response. That response will include integrated ecosystem approach, infrastructure, priority areas, focusing on SMEs, education, ecosystem, and then we will finish with a question and answers. There are several definitions for AI. The one that we'll use for this presentation is one by OECD, which defines AI as the ability of machines and systems to acquire and apply knowledge and to carry out intelligent behavior. At the root, or the tool that is used for AI, are algorithms. We are already interacting with many forms or building blocks of AI, which we are not even sure that we are interacting with at times. And I have a diagram here which shows at least some of the fields of AI, the description and examples of them. Next, I want to look at the global market for AI. There's fierce global competition among top countries in the AI market. USA and China are the main protagonists, followed by India, Japan, and Israel. The competition between US and China, you will see being demonstrated in politics and in trade as it relates to AI, although it is not saying directly that it is related to AI. The size of the market is significant. It is estimated at 2.4 trillion in 2020, and by 2025 is expected to grow to $6.4 trillion. The leading industries are manufacturing, telecommunication, natural resources, consumer products, healthcare, and banking. Now, the question is, how should the region respond to this change that will be taking place, because it is expected that AI will impact every single market in the world. AI is a general purpose technology and it will impact us. So what I want to do here is to propose a framework for the Caribbean response. First, I'm suggesting that each country should not decide to go it alone. The size of the regional economy in terms of population is just about 17 million. And the country with the highest GDP is Bahamas with $25,000 per person. We are about the size of Guatemala, not very big. CARICOM has a regional policy as it relates to the harmonization of ICT, legal and regulatory regimes. And I think this is the umbrella in which we should go under. This harmonization is for the facilitation of regional cooperation and collaboration and maximizing the use of resources. I really don't think that we need to recreate the wheel here. So it's my first response, ecosystem approach. Countries do not go it alone. We should go as one group or one block. The next pillar that we need to look at is infrastructure. Again, CARICOM has a policy here about robust national and regional broadband infrastructure. And the reason for this is to facilitate access to services and overcoming physical barriers to business collaboration and innovation in the region. We are a very dispersed region, and when we're trying to move around by air, it takes a long time, and we have to go to the United States before we can go to any other country in the Caribbean too often. So the need for robust regional broadband infrastructure is extremely important. And an important aspect of this is going to be 5G, which we're on the cusp of introducing or looking at introducing in the region. The next area that I want to look at is what should be priority areas for growth and development in the region. In 2010, the Council of Trade and Economic Development looked at 7 priority areas for regional development. They are professional services, financial services, sports, culture and entertainment, ICT, health and wellness, tourism, and educational services. In my opinion, these are areas that we should be concentrating on. As a region, we are a service-oriented economy, and these are areas in which we can excel in. The next area that I need to look at is, okay, where should we be focused on? What segment of the market should we be looking at? Should these be big companies or small companies? And I'm recommending that we should be concentrating on SMEs, small, medium enterprises, major source of income, breeding ground for entrepreneurship and innovation, and a provider of employment. They're also a major contributor to GDP. However, these SMEs are going to need tax incentives, and they're going to need capital subsidies for them to start adapting AI. They'll also need the talent and the know-how, and these talent and know-how should be coming from universities and in some cases, larger firms. I'll expand on this later on. Now let's look at education, an important area, because education is what is going to be used to drive whatever changes that is taking place in the economy as it relates to AI. At the basic level, there should be the promotion of digital literacy. Everybody in the region should be digitally literate. They should be knowing what they're going into and not be going into any of these things or taking on any of these technologies blindly. We have been promoting science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, which are STEM subjects, but we must also look at entrepreneurship. When we innovate, we need to be able to carry it to the market and make money from it. And there needs to be also a concentration of creativity. Additionally, the orientation of teaching needs to move from teacher-centered to student-centered. There's been some changes in this. Another area that I want to look, another item that I want to look at on the education on the level 1 has to do with online and offline integration, in which classes now should be fused with both online and offline integration. A final thing that I want to mention on this slide, which is of importance, is that there needs to be some labor market assessment and a projection as to what skills we have, so that if there's any mismatch, we can close that gap. The second area of education has to do with research and innovation. We tend to be a copycat region. We do not engage in R&D, and there needs to be more engagement in R&D. There needs to be research at the university level And this must be a tripartite arrangement in which the public sector, the private sector, and universities are involved. And they're also involved in determining exactly what kind of research is going to take place. There also needs to be innovation hubs in all of the major countries in the region that has universities. And they should be, the innovation should be connected with the 7 areas that Coated mentioned earlier. The third level of education has to do with AI now influencing education, which is intelligent, adaptive education. But that's down the road. But just for us to remember that that is something that is going to happen. The final area that I want to look at, or pillar that I want to look at, is security and trust. Now, CARICOM has a policy on security, effective secure technology and management systems. That's part of CARICOM's policy. And they want to build confidence, the confidence of users in the security of the digital assets. However, based on what is happening with AI and the disadvantages that are there, it needs to go beyond just security. And we need to look at what will breed confidence. One of the disadvantages and one of the extreme disadvantage of AI is what is called technology singularity. This is where the algorithms now start taking control, making their own decisions, and humans are subjugated then by technology. In order to avoid that, the UNESCO has come up with a humanistic framework to protect fundamental human rights and consumer rights. And what is being suggested here is that this should be incorporated in what CARICOM is saying about security. There should be distrust and there's distrust. Therefore, at the end of the day, there is no possibility of singularity in which what takes place is that computers take control over humans. In wrapping up, I just want to review what I presented. One, we looked at AI in context, and we looked at the Caribbean response, and this included integrated ecosystem response, infrastructure, priority areas, focusing on SMEs, education, and ecosystem of trust. And this ends my presentation. Thank you. I am Paul Goulding from the College of Business and Management at the University of Technology, Jamaica.
Thank you very much, Professor Goulding. And the presentation is spot on, because as persons were posting questions and also chatting, you were addressing, already anticipating some of those and addressing them in your presentation. We have quite a few comments on the treatment of data and the need for open data, a very important issue that we're going to have to deal with in the context of AI policy for the Caribbean. It probably is a good time to just do another quick poll on an aspect of this question of the treatment of data. And that question is around whether we believe people should own their personal data and have a right to determine how it is accessed and used. And we have an overwhelming response so far. Most persons saying, yes, we should own our personal data and we should determine how it is accessed and used. That's something we're going to have to talk about in terms of how we think about data and this question of open data, because data is the oil and the oxygen for artificial intelligence. And our sociologists and anthropologists and others are going to have to help us to unpack this question of personal data, which is really a part of us, our digital selves, and the question of trading you know, that data in the context of our experience with slavery and the treatment of people as chattel. A very interesting construct for us to explore as we talk about AI policy in the Caribbean. So let us now hop over to Guyana and hear from our last presenter, who is the founder and CEO of V75 and an entrepreneur in the AI field and also an educator, Eldon Marks. Welcome.
In this presentation, I'll share my perspective on artificial intelligence innovation and policy for the region. My name is Eldon Marks. I am the founder and CEO of V75 Inc. and the founding director of Nexus Hub Inc. I have spent almost 2 decades in the technology field within Guyana as an academic, practitioner, and social entrepreneur. I hold a master's degree from Howard University in Systems and Computer Science with a specialization in AI. I taught computer science at the University of Guyana for over a decade before starting a tech community, which has to date evolved into a conversational AI company, which is known as V75 Inc., and a nonprofit technology and innovation center by the name of Nexus Hub Inc. Collectively, over the past 2 years, these entities introduced the conversational AI specialization to the local tech industry in Guyana. And we managed to create engaging tech opportunities for over 100 talented youth here, among which are 20 certified conversational AI specialists who have built conversational AI experiences for over 25 million users worldwide. In addition, we emphasize a strong innovation culture through which we have numerous research and development projects involving AI. You can see some of that at our website at v75inc.com. I'll begin this talk by discussing some of the more powerful things AI can do, as well as some concerns we may have regarding its growing capabilities. From here, I'll offer a perspective on how we may view AI innovation and regulation, particularly in a regional context. And finally, I'll wrap up by offering some final thoughts on the topic. Right, so demystifying AI. So when broken down, we collectively refer to artificial intelligence as a composite of algorithms, models, and data sets which are architected to emulate ways in which we as humans process information. AI can be viewed as a category of computing which defines itself by encompassing less linear, more complex ways of processing information, which have the ability to match or surpass human-level processing, such as interpreting visual information, natural language understanding, and in particular, synthesizing new information at speeds far greater than we are ever capable of. The current state of AI. Over the past few years, the typical AI stack has evolved from a relatively simple state to one that's really complex, involving deep learning and reinforcement learning. In addition to being able to teach these algorithms and models to perform human-level tasks really well, the AI is able to teach itself at a superhuman pace. And this makes this new AI stack extraordinarily powerful. So here are some promising advances in AI. So with this extraordinarily powerful AI stack, we can already see real-world examples of AI making promising contributions to modern science. One such example is in augmenting the diagnostic capabilities of medical doctors in detecting the presence and spread of cancer and tumors, and even predicting heart attacks. So this AI is typically fed labeled training data in the form of patient scans, and then they're able to compile these models that visually pick up on the most subtle abnormalities that typically escape human eyes. And then they can also make inferences based on large detailed data sets, which is completely beyond the processing capabilities of your typical human MD. We also see self-driving cars tremendously reduce traffic collisions because they never get tired, they never drive drunk, or fail to respond in time. So with these recent advancements, we can already see that AI can save millions and even more so with further advancements. So these recent advancements have also made it possible to have human in the room type conversations with machines. The conversational AI industry is exploding because of this, and we see research-driven companies such as Clink Inc. in Ann Arbor, Michigan, deliver practical, useful conversational AI experiences, primarily in the banking sector, which allow customers to have conversations with an app that they would otherwise have with a bank teller. Finally, the scale and speed of AI is capable of processing information in unparalleled ways. For example, Google automatically captions over 1 billion YouTube videos in 10 different languages. And you can imagine that this has positive implications on the diffusion of information. So there are also concerns amidst the promising capabilities of AI. And these promising advances are all happening at such a rapid pace as we hurtle towards this inevitable artificial general intelligence, which is where AI becomes less domain specific and capable of learning and mastering just about anything a human can. This should be concerning to us, even now, because our physical world depends on and is intertwined with this digital one that we've built on the same stuff that AI so masterfully manipulates, which is data. We see examples of this concern manifest in the form of deepfakes for misinformation and disinformation campaigns and micro-targeting, such as in the Cambridge Analytica scandal, Facebook. So here's a perspective on AI innovation and regulation given these concerns. So AI innovation and policy is a controversial topic. Some argue that regulation should be applied after innovation takes place so as not to stifle innovation, whereas others suggest that innovation should not be left unchecked or unregulated. I believe both have merits, and I offer an alternative perspective on the way in which we may view AI innovation and regulation, one in which I trust will lead to a framework that seeks to help innovation and policy coexist and complement one another in moving forward. So here's the alternative perspective. And we begin by looking at the source of our concerns, which will, if you break down the rapid pace at which AI is growing and its influence, we identify that with regards to AI capability, we see certain notable targets that attract our concerns, namely data privacy, data legitimacy, or maintaining trust, labor displacement through automation, for instance, the 4IR, which will inherently affect livelihoods. So expanding on this, we need to acknowledge a couple of things. One, AI can't yet act on its own accord to violate data privacy and legitimacy, etc. It has to be applied and it has to be directed by us, human beings. And two, we'll still need AI innovation in creating safeguards against the negative effects that we've identified. We need technology to counteract the possible misuse of technology. So the bottom line here is that we should not begin by striving to regulate AI innovation broadly. Instead, we should focus on preserving our principles to guide this innovation. So here's a look at some recommendations in terms of preserving privacy. So we have to realistically accept the fact that due to the interplay, as mentioned, between technology and society, we are facing a new brand of privacy, one in which the only way to avoid a digital footprint is to live in total technological isolation, if you so choose. So at best, we can look forward to being in control of how our data is used and by whom, at best. So with that said, in the midst of data-hungry AI models that need data in order to advance, we can promote the use of anonymized data rather than withhold it altogether. We can also support the continued advancement of AI models to the point at which they require less and less data for training. And finally, it goes without saying that we need to devise and enforce appropriate data protection policies which don't violate the preceding recommendations. So with regards to preserving trust amidst the growing capabilities of AI, we've seen that these capabilities allow AI to mine massive amounts of data and produce audio-visual deepfakes and the like. I recommend the following. 1, support the innovation of AI technologies which are capable of detecting illegitimate data or assessing the authenticity of digital forms of identity. 2, enforce the widespread use of these technologies in appropriate mediums such as digital news outlets, social media, and in the midst of digital exchanges between entities. With regards to preserving livelihoods, particularly within the region, we have a unique opportunity here in the region with regards to labor, given our state of technological diffusion and adoption. I believe that it'll be more likely for us in the region to create new jobs through AI outsourcing before the feared disruptive effects of AI automation take hold. And this chart here depicts why. So according to the US Bureau of Statistics, labor statistics, only 5% of occupations are 100% automatable. And this is in the US, and 60% of occupations have at least 30% of their activities that are automatable. So one would expect that with these figures being contextual to the United States, they'll be less concerning in the regional context given our state of digital adoption and the likelihood of rapid automation that can possibly take hold within a given time period. Hence my theory that, AI outsourcing can create more jobs well before AI automation can disrupt the job market. So with regards to preserving livelihoods and in getting ahead of any labor disruption and supporting the responsible diffusion of AI in the region, I suggest we devise policies which foster the introduction of AI-based specializations at the industry level across the region. This will increase the chances of guided endogenous AI innovations eventually emerging, which we expect to be more context-aware and ethical and applicable for us in the region. Some other thoughts on this topic. The possibilities of what AI can bring should be introduced in early childhood education to create future pioneers. This needs to be applied now, and we also need to apply existing applicable technologies to optimize what we have and create an air of receptivity to what is to come in the future. So we also need to make a meaningful bridge between academia and industry to achieve true utilitarianism at the tertiary institutions and a culture of research in motion within industry itself. We need to ensure that as the capabilities of the AI stack grow in time, we as end users remain in control to ensure that these systems perform predictably and do exactly what we want them to do, nothing else. So we don't want any rogue AI running around like we see in the movies. So some final thoughts. AI innovation does more good than harm. The source of harm is not within the innovation itself, but within the choices that we as humans make to apply technologies in ways that they should not be applied. So it comes back to us paying attention to the values and standards and principles that we wish to protect, to guide policy making with regards to governing AI innovation. And all things being considered, we can't expect to anticipate every possible outcome as AI evolves. There are just too many variables, but what we can also do is implement a system where we continuously observe, devise, implement, evaluate, refine, and repeat, all guided by those principles that were mentioned, namely privacy, trust, and the protection of livelihoods. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eldon. That was an excellent presentation. Quite a lot that you've given us there, food for thought. And of course, a lot of persons are going to be buoyed by what you said about how we can protect our livelihood in the Caribbean, looking at AI and this question of employment. Of course, embedded in what you've said there is this business of the relevance of the system of education, because we have a very much labor intensive economy, and your notion of outsourcing is predicated on skills development at a certain level. So we'll have to look at that very closely. And you've touched on this question of regulation. We're going to do a poll on that in just a little bit. Charles Denbo is very much supportive of your position, which I understand, Eldon, you seem to be saying, let's look much more closely at soft law guidelines and principles and not so much hard regulation, which Charles Denbo supports. He says innovate first, then regulate later. Again, of course, there's this assumption that innovation stops at a certain point, and that doesn't happen with AI. Let's just open up a little bit, respond to some questions from the audience, and also responses from the panelists to what you've heard from each other. And can we begin with Anthea Anderson, who is asking about low-hanging fruits, which really is for us to answer. Are there use cases that we have already seen which suggest a clear advantage for the Caribbean, given our current strengths in the creative industries, in agriculture, manufacturing, and just the fact that we are prototypes of human system interaction. Naturally creative people. We can steal a computerized car and don't know anything about computers. We can build, break down, put back as Caribbean people. So what does that portend in terms of low-hanging fruits? Erica?
Yeah, Mr. Green, if I could respond to that. I think when we are thinking about low-hanging fruits, I normally think about the data pyramid. At the top of the pyramid, we're going to have some really great people that are data engineers and data scientists and all the people that can do all the technical interpretation of the data. But I like to talk about this concept of democratizing digital and the fact that we have to convince everyday citizens that they can be creators of data and information as well. The key to that will be to teaching the people what formats are needed so that these algorithms can consume. Someone in the chat mentioned that we have limited data sets here in the Caribbean. So I think we need to build out our ecosystem at the top level. We have some great computer scientists, and we're adding the artificial intelligence courses at the university level. But if we're talking about inclusivity and getting everyone involved in artificial intelligence, we need to look at some other ways like data creation that doesn't maybe require the top skill sets of a university graduate. Data cleansing, getting a spreadsheet ready so that it can be consumed by the AI system. We need to make sure that we're democratizing the creation of data. And I do believe at the basic level, there's a huge opportunity for us here in the Caribbean.
Paul, any views on this? You're muted.
Just to mention, just to pick up on this point about limited data. When we went around the Caribbean trying to get data on anything at all about the industry, it was almost non-existent. And that is going to be a primary area for us to start. as it relates to use cases though, Eldon may be able to mention something on this, but the region has to change the way it operates. It has to be far more innovative. Have been very comfortable just being consumers. That has to change, and what is going to make that change has to be our education system. Without that, there will be no change. We will sit and remain consumers of the technology and do nothing else. And as you have seen with telecommunications and all that, in which there was a time in which we would have earned foreign exchange, for instance, from incoming calls, those things don't happen anymore. We have to look at ways in which we can contribute to the digital economy based on innovation and entrepreneurship. Innovation alone is not good enough. You innovate and persons take your innovation and make a lot of money off it. So it's both innovation and entrepreneurship. I have no examples of use cases. I'll ask Eldon to comment on that.
Eldon?
Yeah, I completely agree with Paul. I believe anything that we at least address at this point in time in this phase within the region, given the state of the region, should include at some level an investment in intellectual capital to make sure that we are providing for our future within the particular field of AI and related technologies. So in that regard, that would shed a light on the development of the technology ecosystem within the region, development of early childhood education, introducing these technologies as early as possible so that we have mass sensitization about what is out there, what is possible with these technologies. So from my standpoint, in terms of the use case, in terms of low-hanging fruit, and I'll shed some light on this in terms of the time frame, we were able to, we were trying as a local technology company to grow organically before we really dove into the AI specialization. But to do that, we actually needed to partner with an external organization in the US. And that helped us to leapfrog. And within a matter of 18 months, we were not only, we were previously consumers, as you would imagine, but within a matter of 18 months, we were certified specialists producing the technology in tandem with this external firm. And that is an example of investing in intellectual capital and directing it. And with the revenue that came in, we were able to, as a tech firm, give ourselves enough of breathing room to focus more on AI innovation, because our priorities then were not necessarily just to pay the bills at the end of the month. We had enough to free our minds up to really look harder into the technologies, what would be possible. And then we looked into product development using the technologies that we were exposed to. So under the circumstances, it begins with investing in intellectual capital, making sure that we not only produce the persons that are capable of picking up on these technologies regionally, but we're able to retain them and then direct their skills and competencies towards the field.
I want to join with some comments I see in the chat, though, where people are reminding us that the internet space is not homogeneous and there are some serious deficiencies. There is an absence of multilingualism. That is something we need to emphasize, and that we need to point our people in that direction, that we are going to need the linguists. It's not just STEM. The arts is critical. And data is about content, but it's one form of content. There is going to be need for a lot of content creation. So our innate creative abilities put us at a competitive and a comparative advantage. And that is something not to be underestimated, even as we are emphasizing deeper studies in mathematics and engineering. And I think that that's a solid point. Now, now Deidre Williams is being provocative, and she's saying, this is all good and well, and the AI policy is great. What's your plan of action when everything crashes? I mean, is that part of the plan? We seem to be banking everything on this closer acquaintance of human beings with intelligent machines and the internet, but everything could go wrong and go left field. And do we have a plan for that? Or should we make sure to include that risk management element in our AI policy? Provocative and very deep.
Cordell,
Yes?
I would like to ask a question so I understand the Caribbean better.
Yes, Dorothy.
First of all, you know, I used to work in India, and they've benefited enormously from the fact that they have a lot of people in Silicon Valley. Do you have a lot of people from the Caribbean working in these poles? Because that could be a very useful opportunity in terms of what Eldon just described about building partnerships between local companies and companies in more developed areas. So I wanted
Any response to that, Eldon?
No, I completely agree. We should leverage the diaspora, and I mean, across the region, many of our talented persons go to other parts of the world, and they get taken up by these other companies. So that could be a way in which we can forge these partnerships by reaching out to the diaspora. And I've been to a couple of conferences, regional conferences, and I've met a number of persons who are working on at Microsoft, Google, and what have you, at these major technology companies who are from the region. So without a doubt, that's definitely a way to go.
Then I just wanted to say about regulation, before you do the poll, that some people compare the situation today to the situation in the Wild West. You know, where you could ride into town and you shoot everybody, you empty the bank and you go off, and there's no accountability.
And you do as many deep fake videos as you wish and get away with it. Dorothy, Dr. Mansing of the University of the West Indies says that we are growing the capacity, and she's right. Our Caribbean people are right across the leading entities. Amazon, we just had the swearing in for a new Chief Justice in Jamaica. And as part of that ceremony, as we were saying goodbye to the outgoing Chief Justice, we were finding out that his son is one of the directors in Amazon. So Caribbean people are all over, little but with Talawa. So I have no doubt if we harness the...
But it's such a great opportunity. It's such a great opportunity.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so no more Wild West.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. Let's just...
Cordell, I just want to, if you'd allow me just to say one thing, just one thing. It is that whatever we're doing in terms of growth and development and using AI for that, it must be inclusive. Persons with what we'd call disadvantages must be included. I see where you have included the Spencers here today in doing GSL, and I want to applaud the organizers for this, because too often we only think about the majority, and the minority is forgotten, especially if they have no voice. And in the case of deaf persons, they literally have no voice, and therefore we tend to disregard them. We must be very conscious of this and put it at the top of our priority whenever we are doing anything.
Thank you, Prof. Let's do a quick poll before we close out on this question of regulation and this hard and soft law issue. How should AI regulation be done? We're assuming, as Dorothy said, there's not going to be a wild, wild west. So there is going to be regulation. Is it government through laws and usual regulations? Is it business, soft law, their guidelines, their practice, their internal policies? Or, as most of you are saying, it's a new world. It requires a very different approach to governance. It has to be an omni-stakeholder approach. The private sector is rivaling government in terms of its power. Ordinary citizens are becoming powerful as we diffuse power and empower people through technology. And so it's an entirely different approach now in how we think about governance. a view to which I subscribe entirely. Well, the conversation does not end here. I want to thank all of you for participating. We're very mindful of your time. We said we would end at 11:30. It's 11:34. I'm sure you could have us go on until midday or 1 o'clock, but we are going to come back to this subject. Thank you all for participating. This has been an enriching discussion. What are the next steps? First, we're going to follow up with a questionnaire soon, and we're going to ask you to complete it and return your answers by the return date in January 2021. There's going to be another forum on February 18 and 19. One of the speakers already confirmed is the Chief Justice of Trinidad and Tobago, who is about to launch a pilot in AI and judicial modernization. That's going to be important. All this talk about bias embedded in AI and the black box, how is that going to play out in the judicial system? So February 18 and 19, we're going to build on what our presenters have said today. So look out for more information. Then in March, there will be an online consultation. At that time, we hope to be presenting a draft AI policy brief for the Caribbean. It leaves only for me to say thank you to the audience, thank you to the presenters and the speakers, and to the support personnel who helped make this a success. This has been the first forum in the AI for the Caribbean initiative. See you in February 2021 for the second forum. Take care of yourselves and your loved ones. Goodbye.